What is going on? No horsing around family. Zach Boyd back at it again. I'm one of two dudes talking Colts football, and today we're super, super excited. I was talking to him before we got on this today. First time two Boyds have ever made it to this podcast. My long lost brother, a guy who we love his story. You guys all know he's a new writer out there at The Athletic. Came formerly from the Indy Star. James, how you been, man? Busy day, huh?
I've been good. Yeah, definitely a busy day, busy week. Excited to jump right in. And of course, I've had pretty much everything thrown at me right off the bat. I mean, first tie in Indianapolis history, covering that, and obviously the kicking situation. So a lot to cover and a lot to expect going forward.
Absolutely. So let's just start with that. Let's just start with the kicking situation. James, I think we all kind of knew that was going to happen. This wasn't just a matter of missing a field goal in a crucial moment. This is kicking two footballs out of bounds. I mean, three big errors inside of one game. That just kind of magnified his career in a nutshell. And I think we all probably felt this was going to happen, maybe a little bit later than we thought it was going to happen in the week. But nevertheless, Blankenship has been cut by the Indianapolis Colts, and looks like we brought in McLaughlin and another kicker from Arizona. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, from what I understand, it had to happen. You feel for Rodrigo. I think the human being aspect, you never want to underestimate how that feels. A lot of people do not have jobs where you're expected to go out there and perform with millions of people watching you do it, and occasionally not do it well. So talking to him in the locker room afterward, it was awkward. It was weird. You kind of got the sense that, at least personally, I was like, this is probably the last time we're talking to him for now in a Colts uniform. Don't know what the future holds. It's obviously with kickers. Sometimes guys get cut early and they bounce back somewhere else. And Robbie Gould is an example of that. Ended up being an all-time great. So you just don't know. But in that moment, I think all of us knew, including you watching it at home, I'm sure something has to give. And now they're pivoting to the two kickers they signed to the practice squad. I'm sure they're making a decision on one of them. Got to have a kicker going into week 2, obviously. But that was not something you expect going into week 1. You're not expected to make a roster decision that drastic right away, but it had to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And, McLaughlin has a little bit of ties with us back a couple years ago when Vinatieri had that kind of, it's an odd kind of dichotomy when it comes to it, because Vinatieri was having the same situations, not being able to make those field goals. And he came in and somebody had to do the job, and we kind of put him on injured reserve to end the season. I expect him probably to win that job ultimately and get called up, I don't know, Saturday night, Sunday morning. What would be your thoughts? I know the kicker from Arizona, don't know much about him, haven't had a chance to research. Big leg is what I'm hearing. But outside of that, don't know a whole lot.
Yeah, so his name is Lucas. I'm hoping, if I say this wrong, I apologize. It's Havariski. I'm sorry, I'm not even saying it right. Lucas H. But yeah. I do think that obviously you want to lean more towards the guy that has more NFL experience. And the weird thing about Chase is he's been pretty good from closer in, weird from the mid distance, and in the long ones he's been good. So it's why do you? How does that even operate? You know what I mean? How are you better from 50 plus than you are from at the 47? It's very weird. And a funny thing about that is I went to school with him. So I was at Illinois when he was at Illinois. He was the Big Ten Kicker of the Year, I believe, at one point. So I guess there's a weird Illini tie there. But obviously Colts fans don't care about that. They want a guy who can put it through the uprights. Exactly. And I think had it been a kick that's 50 plus yards, maybe Rodrigo is still here, but to miss a 42-yarder in a dome and in the way he missed it, I mean, quite frankly, it was not close. After the 2 kicks out of bounds, it had to happen. I do think that it's been understated how difficult it is to find a consistent kicker in the NFL. I think the average person thinks, oh, we'll just cut him and sign someone else and we'll be fine. And it's no, kicking is very delicate. And to be quite honest, there's only, I would say, maybe 10 really good kickers in the NFL. You just need someone that's serviceable. And I believe from about 45 and in, you want someone that's money most of the time. And as I'm sure you've thought about or talked about, this was not a one kick issue for Rodrigo. It was one of those things where this had kind of been lingering, and that felt like the final nail in the coffin, which it was. And now, heading into Jacksonville where you haven't won in a while, where your season collapsed last year, you don't need something else hanging over your head where you're not sure of what your team can do.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I was texting George Bremer that night saying, "Hey, what do you feel about this?" And he just described it as being a little bit awkward, like you did earlier, a little bit weird and awkward in that locker room, almost like one of your friends is getting ready to get the pink slip, and everybody's just kind of let it play out. But I guess we got to move on. We got to talk about other things. Time to get that bad taste out of our mouth. Talk about what we liked. I mean, you literally joined the Colts community at the best time. I mean, you have a potentially, if he's healthy, historically good running back playing for the Indianapolis Colts. And he might even be a historically good human being when it's all said and done as well. I mean, very fun to talk to. I was on the sidelines down there at training camp, and he's just he's a light. I mean, he's just a light when you're around him. And how fun was it? Has it been watching him up to this point and getting to see him in live game action as advertised, right, James?
I'll say this, tie game, weird game, whatever you want to call it, but seeing JT put the team on his back was pretty incredible. I thought him and Pitt were the two guys that were the best players on the field at one point. Matt Ryan looked really good as well in that fourth quarter. But to be able to run the ball when you're down, 17 points and then at one point 14 points, when you're behind and not completely abandon the run, and this guy can get you 8, 9, 10. I think it was a drive there where he had like 9, 13, 14. We was just gashing.
Yeah.
It just felt like I was watching someone like, okay, this is what a special player looks like. It's not normal to do that. And as you said, he's a really good guy. I had a chance to talk to him in an interview once or twice, I believe, throughout camp. And the thing about JT is he's never going to say how good he is or even give an inclination of how good he is. But then everyone else around him is he's the best player, arguably in football. So that was exciting to see. And I think that's something that's obviously encouraging. The one thing I will say on the flip side is he had 33 touches, 31 carries, 22 catches. You'd like to see that number go down a little bit throughout the season. But I do understand why it went up. It was give it to your best player so we don't lose our season opener. Granted, they're undefeated, but also winless. So you didn't win the game, but it's still better than losing. So I thought he looked great. I mean, picked it right where he left off. And I think JT is going to be in for a big year. I just don't think that they're going to be able to sustain giving him 30 carries, obviously, week to week.
Yeah, that's really, really hard. I mean, I think Frank Rich mentioned even earlier in the offseason that they'd like to have a little bit of load management with them.
Yeah.
So much for load management week one, just giving this guy the ball. I mean, it's just hard not to, though. It's just like in basketball, as you've covered, you got the best player on the court. He's going to have the ball in his hands to be able to do things and be dynamic as he was. Were you surprised at all at Frank Reich's play calling in this game? He has – ever since he's been here, you either love him or you hate him in most games. I mean, he goes for things. He believes in his players. He's always doubling down and betting on his players. A little bit of a head scratcher, 4th and goal, and you give the ball to the guy that not who we talked about earlier with Jonathan Taylor, with Nyheim Hines.
Yeah, and no disrespect to Nyheim Hines, but everyone knows he gives you a different look in the backfield. He's going to give you more check downs, more of that receiver look. But to me, when you have arguably the best player at his position at your disposal, if you're going to go for, putting your heavy package and run it behind Jonathan Taylor, I truly believe if you are a serious team, if you're a team that's going to make the playoffs, as they all want to, you have to be able to get 2 yards behind the best player, on your team. So I thought that was a really weird call with the direct snap. And sometimes, and what other people were telling me in the press boxes, listening to other writers and talking to other guys who've been on this beat a lot longer than me, it's sometimes Frank Reich can overthink it a little too much and maybe get a little too cute. And I thought that was an example of that. It was just, and I think that, combined with the Alec Pierce drop later on, it just, after that, the game just shifted. It felt like the Colts were going down the field, getting whatever they wanted, but they weren't scoring. And after that, you give the Texans confidence, they get a little more mojo, they make a few plays, and then you're staring down a potential loss in week one. So it was a really weird game, but I thought when the play calling mattered in the fourth quarter, it looked good. And quite frankly, when they picked it up a little bit and weren't as stagnant, maybe went a little no huddle, those types of things helped them. And in the end, they were able to escape unscathed, but again, in no man's land.
Yeah, let's go. One of the worst feelings in football. You play 70 minutes and you can't say you won. You can't say you lost. I mean,
oh my God. And that's the thing. It's like, I always think if the players had just gone out there and shook hands before the game, hey, we'll just take a tie today, it would have been the same exact thing as going out there and putting your body on the line. Luckily, the Colts didn't have any like major injuries, things like that. But it's like you put all that on the line and you don't have something to show for it. But the funny part about it is, as I was writing my game story about how weird it was talking to all the guys, EJ Speed telling me it was some BS, and giving it to me straight. We're watching the other scores come in and we're like, wait a second. The Jaguars lost. Wait a second. Another divisional team lost. So it was funny by the end of the day that they were the ones tied with the Texans atop of the standings because, the other two divisional teams lost. So that was just like a funny button on top of a weird day because it's still better to be 0-1 than to be 0-1. Although I do think that I think it's fair to say the Colts felt like they lost that game.
Yeah.
I think they felt and they deserved to feel, and it's quite honestly, I talked about this with Zach Kiefer after the game. It's like, did they deserve to win? Did the Colts deserve to win? No. But who cares about deserve in a win-loss column? Deserve does not matter. You can go back throughout history and say this team deserved to win Super Bowl. This player deserved the MVP. No one cares about that. It's who gets it done. So They were able to get it done in a way, just not fully. And I do think, that's something that could potentially haunt them down the stretch, which is why I think this Jacksonville game is so crucial going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think just us as Colts fans, we've been covering this for a little bit over a year, and, we have the instant reaction. A lot of people have responded. We had over almost 5,000 views on that YouTube video, and it was just raw emotion coming out of me and my co-host, Stephen Burton, and just we were deflated, man. I mean, we were just deflated by the fact that we all know how the season ended last year. To start your season off that way was just, man, that's really, really rough. James, I want to ask you this. Who the hell is our number 2 wide receiver on this football team?
Oh, man. So I might have got myself a little hot water when I asked Marcus Brady today. I was like, hey, outside of, Pittman and JT, how do you get more out of your other guys? And Marcus Brady pushed back a little bit. He's like, I think we've got a lot of those guys. And he broke down the numbers. And he's like, we threw for 352. Pitt got 120, 121. So it was less than half. And we were moving the ball with JT. And that takes a collective effort. And I'm not discrediting the receivers blocking, and I'm not discrediting the grabs that they did have in that fourth quarter. I know Ashton Dunlin had a few. I know Paris had a big third down grab. However, the simple eye test will tell you it was the Pittman and JT show, quite frankly. And I do think, if Alec catches the ball in the end zone, if Ashton catches the other one in the end zone, maybe you say something different because you got, another touchdown from another guy. But I don't know, man. I think that going into it, you probably thought it was Alec, but after that drop, it's like, man, could that mess with the rookie? I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that's going to be his entire season or whatever, but that has to weigh on your mind. Like, I just dropped my first touchdown, and it was a great play by Matt Ryan, and the offensive line. He extended the play, he ripped it across the end zone, and you drop it. So I don't know. I really do not know who the number 2 is. I would say it's between Alec and Paris. Maybe I lean a little more towards Paris because of what he offers in the crossers and the slant game. However, you have to see more because my thing goes back to this. The Texans aren't a good football team. So everything you did against them, yes, it worked, but it's not going to work against teams that are better. And quite frankly, I think if you give that same performance this upcoming Sunday against the Jaguars, you're going to lose because better teams are going to defend Michael Pittman Jr. better. They're going to stack the box better and have better run defenses for JT. So you can't rely on these guys to bail you out. You got away with it once, but I do think you have to see more consistency from the other guys because it doesn't have to be, huge numbers, but it got to be something where you're kind of alleviating that pressure because, again, until that fourth quarter, that offense was dead in the water, and it was literally just JT or MP for a first down, and that was pretty much the offense.
Exactly. And I've said this all along, if I know this, then that you're going to JT, if you're going to Michael Pittman Jr., if I know that's the game plan going into every single week, well, people who are getting paid millions of dollars are also going to know that's the game plan going into that football game. And I get it, spreading the ball around. I understand that. And I understand being a good coach, respecting your young players, letting those guys grow. But I've always said you could do both. I've always said you could let those young guys play, and then you could bring in a veteran guy and maybe kind of, transition as the season goes along. I mean, a popular name around here is T.Y. Hilton, because obviously he's been here for so long, but doesn't even have to be him. But I just think when the game's on the line and they're stacking the box and they're going up against Michael Pittman Jr., double teaming him and bracketing him, you got to have a guy that you can throw the football to and you can really, really feel good about. And I don't know right now, honestly, James, if we feel really, really good about who that other guy is. Now, maybe we will, as the season goes along, maybe we will feel really good about that other guy. But that's going to be a debate, probably something that goes on all season long. Let's get over to the defensive side. What'd you like? What'd you not like?
I thought that they were non-existent as far as the pass rush early on. I know Lake, Kwity Paye, and EJ Speed had some huge plays, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was a little quiet, Unique Ngakoue, you expect him to come in and be that force, and he wasn't really that, I thought that Grover Stewart had a pretty good game. Obviously, DeForest Buckner had the fumble recovery. So they had some plays, and they made some plays. It just seemed like it took them a little too long to get going. And then talking to Gus Bradley today, he did mention that, there were some issues as far as like just recognition in the secondary with certain routes, certain coverages. Do you stay attached to this guy? Do you not? Because it looked like the A.J. Howard touchdowns were more so like a blown coverage than it was like a great play, if that makes sense. Not to take anything away from the Texans, because you scheme things up to confuse, defenses, but it seemed like they were just a little out of sync in the secondary and not enough force up front, from your big guys. So I do think they'll get a little more cleaned up in that regard. Obviously, they held firm in that fourth quarter, because any other points and they lose the game. So I think that I expected some growing pains out of them, but maybe not just as quiet as a start. It just seemed like they were missing something. And obviously that a lot of things could change if Shaquille Leonard is back. Don't know about his status just yet for Sunday, but even without him, you'd like to see more energy and just more pop around the football.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And going back, and I'm just a football nerd, James, I went back and watched the All 22, and the play they ran in the first half to O.J. Howard for the touchdown is the exact same play they ran in the second half. They literally just said, you just go to the other side of the field, and we're going to do the same thing. Hell, it worked in the first half. We might as well give it a shot right here. Busted coverage, and I am a huge, huge, huge Julian Blackmon fan. That wasn't one of his best games, man. I mean, he was just out of place. Really, honestly, the defensive backs, and I've kind of been, beating the drum a little bit for having Isaiah Rodgers out there. Mm-hmm. I like the way he finds the ball. I don't know how to explain it, but when that ball's in the air, that man is around the ball. Maybe they'll get him, implemented a little bit more as the season goes. So, James, I got to ask you this question before you go. Do you think we're going to have a big turnaround this week going into the Jaguars game? What is just the mood and the temperament inside over there on West 56 right now?
I'll say this. They've been downplaying it and saying it's a new season, new chapter, whatever. I don't care anything about those cliches. This matters. I think it matters for a number of reasons. Number one, this is where your season collapsed last year. If you're different, you got to go out there and be different. And then secondly, the streak. It's one of those weird streaks, and like the Jaguars have not been good, but you haven't beaten them in Jacksonville. Granted, I know one of the games was overseas, so it technically wasn't a road game, but whatever. You haven't beaten them in any of the technical road games there since 2014. And to give anyone perspective, I was a senior in high school. That was my graduating year. So It's been a little while since then. So I do think that it matters. I would say the mood is, they're not nervous. They're not like overly hyped for it. But I do think there's going to be some underlying sentiment. Obviously, Unique in a sense is going to have his own personal feelings about that. And so I think that they have to get it done is kind of how I look at it. If this team is serious, if you want to make the playoffs, the Colts have to go out there and get a W, mainly because, one, you didn't get one in week one. And although it's not a loss, it still could come back to bite you. And again, you're starting off 5 of the first 7 are divisional games. You can't squander this. And I think you need a win going into week 3 to feel confident about yourselves, because when Mahomes, and them come to town, you got to be on your P's and Q's. So I think you have to get all that out of your system, and you do not want to see a hangover that we saw in week 1 that you had for all the game last year in Jacksonville. I know they keep telling us, or I won't say they keep telling us, but I'm sure in their mind they're probably saying we're sick of talking about this. If you're sick of talking about it, get a win and do it in a way that makes people confident about your team. Like, they have the talent, they've got the Pro Bowlers, they've got the All-Pro players, they've got all these things, but I think you have to go out there and get a win. Even if Shaquille Leonard isn't available, it's still, in my opinion, no excuse to not go out there and get a win after starting so slow against Houston. Like, if they play with some signs of life before the fourth quarter, I think that they have a pretty good chance of winning.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, you're playing 2 of the worst. I think it's fair to say 2 of the bottom teams in the NFL first 2 weeks. I think it was all the expectation was, hey, here's a chance to kind of get out of these bad streaks. Hadn't won since 2013. As a season opener, hadn't beat the Jags on the road since 2014. Got a chance to kind of check both of those off. Mm-hmm. All that being said, all of what happened in that game, and we still have a chance to come out this week and be in first place in the AFC South. And I think that's really the road to lead to the playoffs for this football team, at least as far as that goes. Want to ask you before you get off here, what's the transition been like going from the Indy Star covering the Pacers to now being on West 56 talking to the Colts? I mean, it's just 2 different, organizations, the way they're ran. How has it been for you, James, when it comes to that?
Yeah, I tweeted this out. One of the funnier things, and this is no disrespect to the Pacers or Herb Simon, but the owner, Herb Simon, is quiet. I never talked to him throughout my entire rookie season with the Pacers. Never really had a chance to sit down and get to know him in the same room as him at all. But then you come over to the Colts, and Jim Irsay is tweeting more than his players. So That's one weird, funny thing. But I think overall, the transition for me, the most challenging thing is just realizing how many more moving parts there are with the football team and how many things have to go right for your football team to be successful. In the NBA, not even speaking specifically for the Pacers, just in general, if you get 3 star players, you've got a pretty good team, because, I mean, you got 15 on the roster, 17 technically. So, about a third of your roster could be made up of, or a fifth of your roster rather could be made up of 3 good players, and you're fine. You're a playoff team. In the NFL, you got 3 great players, but they're all in different positions, or they're not really clicking together. I mean, you got 50 other guys you got to think about. So that's the challenging thing for me, is just keeping up with who matters where. Like, all of these guys have roles. All of them obviously would like to win, but it just looks different because Matt Ryan is not expected to be, like Tyrese Halliburton and others, where you're expected to play offense and defense. Could you imagine Matt Ryan lining up as, like, I don't know, a linebacker or a corner? Like, no way. So I think that's the thing for me. And then also, the one thing I do enjoy, and again, no disrespect to the Pacers at all, is just the NBA thing. In the NFL, every game matters. Like, every single game matters. That's one thing about the NBA, is like, you might get in some of these dog days of the season where you're on a back-to-back and you're on a 7-game road trip, whatever, and you're not going to start your starters. You're not going to play certain guys. You might get pulled early in the game or whatever. In the NFL, you're only resting guys if you've won 13 games, if you won 14 games. So that's been the biggest transition for me, or some of the biggest transitions. But I think overall it's been fun. It's just been a whirlwind. A couple of years ago, I didn't think I would be covering the NBA or the NFL. I even did some fever games, on the WNBA side. Like, I never imagined any of this, which is why I think I break the fourth wall probably more than most beat writers. I don't care. It's cool. I have a cool job. It's fun. I get to travel the country, write about football, talk about football. That's a privilege. That's a blessing. So I'm not going to take it for granted. And I think we kind of see that in the same way. Like, it's fun, man. We get to do what we love to a certain extent. So obviously the dream as a kid is to be an athlete, to be in the locker room after the game. But, I just went a different route and still made it. So I'm grateful for that.
Heck yeah, man. We're super excited to have you on here. James, I just want to thank you real quick, man, for taking time out of your busy schedule. You mentioned Zach Kiefer earlier. How's that been working with Zach and Bob over there at the Athletic? I know Stephen Holder did a great job there for several years. That fraternity's pretty tight-knit, huh?
Yeah, no, they're all great. And I think the other cool thing is, even though some of the other guys aren't a part of the Athletic and their competition, it's still a lot of camaraderie that I didn't have, covering the Pacers, just because it's a different beat. You're traveling a lot more. And most of the time I was one of the only writers for the Pacers that traveled on the road. So it was by myself, but now we're together, we went out to eat together. You can, laugh and joke in the press box. So we all get down to business. So I like the standard that I'm held to at the Athletic. I hold myself personally to a high standard, but I think anytime you can kind of be challenged by other great writers. I mean, Joel Erickson is great. Nate Atkins, George is great. You got Chap, who's been here forever, and then you got our guys. You got Holder. So I think that it just forces me to even be that more present and that more as far as just holding myself to a higher standard and being sharper and being more intelligent and more dialed in. So I like it. I feel like it's a competitor in me, in a sense. Like, I'm not an athlete by any sense. Like, I'm a pick up basketball aficionado. That's about it. But I think that when you're challenged by other great writers, other great people, it makes you better overall. So I got no complaints, man. Bob's great. He's got a million stories for about a million different years because he's a million years old. Bob, I'm sorry. But yeah, man, it's been fun. I'm grateful for sure.
Cool, man. All right. Well, there you go. You wanted it. You guys asked to have him on here. I went ahead and took the chance and bet on myself and asked him to come on. Oh. James Boyd from The Athletic joined us today. Guys, we'll end the show like we always do. I love you. James loves you. Let's go, Colts Nation, and we're out.